It's the 1980s, years after Atari breaks new ground by bringing arcade games to home console. The home console market crashes and is revitalized by a Japanese company called Nintendo with their iconic Nintendo Entertainment System. Two events that will forever change the face of gaming. However, Japan and America aren't the only countries that are making gaming history in the 1980s. In 1987 in France, Muriel Travis is releasing her first video game, May Willow. She doesn't realize it yet, but she's the first black female to work as a game designer. So this all started back in February. I wanted to create a video for Black History Month, and I wanted to include the first black female game designer, and I realized I didn't know who it was, and Google wasn't much help either. Eventually, I found out it was Muriel, and we had a 1-hour interview. Excerpts from that interview can be found in this micro-documentary, while the full interview can be found in written form in the links below. Also in that article, you'll find other resources so you can find out more about Muriel and her amazing story. This video kind of serves as a launch pad to give you a base knowledge on Muriel and the stuff that she's done. Now, with that said, let's start at the beginning. Muriel's story starts on the Caribbean island of Martinique. From a young age, she loved board games and eventually became interested in games that were based around strategy, like Go, chess, and Monopoly. It doesn't take her long, however, to realize she'd rather be the one making the games than the one playing them. So she starts creating her own games, such as authoring crossword puzzles and eventually moving on to more elaborate things like planning murder mystery parties for her friends. Eventually, Muriel would leave Martinique after graduating high school to pursue a degree in engineering at the Higher Institute of Electronics in Paris. After graduating, she would work for Aerospatiale, an aerospace company where she would be responsible for optimizing maintenance procedures on UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. But eventually, Muriel realizes this isn't what she wants to do.
C'était déjà une question morale, parce que je côtoyais des vendeurs d'armes dont je n'aimais pas du tout la mentalité. Ensuite, je ne trouvais pas ce domaine assez créatif. En fait, je ne m'en étais pas rendu compte sur le moment. C'est après, a posteriori, que je me suis aperçu que j'avais envie de créer mes propres scénarios et non pas programmer des choses qu'on m'imposait.
After 5 years with the company, Muriel left Aerospatiale and eventually found herself at Cocktail Vision, a video game development company. Recognizing her talents, Cocktail Vision had Muriel design what would become her first video game, May Willow. To help write the story, Muriel collaborates with French writer and longtime friend Patrick Chamoiseau. For the story, they look to home and decide to base the game off the legend of gold jars, an old Martinician legend. The legend states that during the slave revolts, the masters of the plantation hid their gold by telling the slaves to place it in a jar and bury it. Once the holes were dug, the slaves were killed and buried with the gold so their restless spirits would keep outsiders away. The game is a first-person point-and-click adventure that has you play an expert in the paranormal on May 7th, 1902, a day before the eruption of Mount Pelée, a real-life occurrence that killed approximately 29,000 people, making it the deadliest eruption of the 20th century. In May Willow, the goal is to learn about the history of the island by investigating different areas, solving puzzles, and interrogating people who live on the island. The game has you solving clues in order to find where the golden jars are buried so you can appease the spirits of the slaves buried there. The game is a hit, and Muriel starts working on her next game. She makes her directorial debut in 1988 with Freedom, Rebels in the Darkness. This game, like the last, takes place on Martinique. Set in the 18th century, you play as one of 4 slaves on a sugarcane plantation who orchestrate a rebellion against the slave masters. The object of the game is to use stealth as you bring other slaves to your cause, with the climax of the game seeing your character trying to convince the plantation owner to set you free. After this, Muriel's games would change focus to another one of her interests, erotica. Muriel's next game, Emmanuelle, a game of eroticism, is developed by Tramis and loosely based off the novel Emmanuelle by Emmanuelle Arsan. Emmanuelle is a woman who becomes unsatisfied with the relationship with her husband and decides to take a lover named Mark. After realizing she still loves her husband, Emmanuelle breaks it off with Mark and leaves for Brazil. You play as Mark as you try to raise your erotic potential so you can once again seduce Emmanuelle. That next year, Muriel would work on Geisha, another erotic adventure. This game sees players traveling to Japan to keep a mad scientist from turning their girlfriend into a robotic geisha. She would return to designing for her next game, Fascination, an erotic thriller point-and-click adventure that had players play a flight stewardess who must solve a murder mystery. In an interview with Feminist Media Histories, Muriel had this to say of Fascination. I had fun reversing the codes by creating a female heroine whose intelligence was at least as important an asset as seduction, who solved riddles through logic. Still, it goes without saying, Muriel's early games pushed the envelope as far as their stories, dealing with such topics as racism, feminism, and erotica. Not only just having them a part of the game, but actually having them be the core concepts and focus of the story. Muriel's later works include Lost in Time, which was promoted as being the first interactive adventure film using full motion video technology, and Urban Runner, an interactive movie which at the time, with its minimum requirement of 640 by 480 resolution and 256 colors, only higher-end computers and monitors could play the game. Though Muriel may be better known for directing the Goblin series, a set of family-friendly puzzle adventure games released in the 90s, and the bizarre adventures of Woodrolf and the Schnibble in 1994, it's her early games that pushed the conventions of storytelling in video games and created a cultural impact. Because even then, with video games being in their infancy, she knew they had potential to tell impactful and mature stories.
Je dirais que le jeu vidéo s'apparente au cinéma d'auteur même. J'ai eu envie de proposer mes propres scénarios, comme fait un réalisateur de cinéma, qui a le désir de porter un sujet qui lui plaît, qui le motive et lui donne envie de mettre en image. Eh bien, c'est un peu la même chose dans le jeu vidéo, avec des thèmes que je voulais explorer comme la sexualité ou l'esclavage. Ce sont des sujets difficiles sur lesquels je voulais faire une expérience et j'avais un moyen, un média qui me permettait de m'exprimer.
The same year Super Mario Bros. 2 was released, Muriel released Freedom, a game about slaves fighting their masters. Phil Salvador of The Obscurity says it best, stating, "Freedom still shocks today, and that it debuted the same year as Super Mario Bros. 2 is almost unfathomable in the traditional framework of game history and culture." This isn't to say Mario and the other games that came out at the time aren't amazing and groundbreaking. To the contrary, these games are excellent and deserve their praise. But an argument could be made that because they are so popular, they help form the idea that video games were only for children. Even today, we still debate if video games is a medium that can handle serious topics appropriately. Though recently games like The Last of Us, Tell Me Why, and a handful of others are just now in the last decade bringing heavier and more serious themes and topics to video games, Muriel in a way foreshadowed that just because it's a video game doesn't mean its story can't be taken seriously and handled appropriately in a mature manner. Muriel would work at Cocktail Vision for many years, arguably helping to develop the company's most recognizable games. But in 2003, after over 1 million copies of the game she helped work on had sold, Muriel left Cocktail Vision and started her own company, Ainsi, a company that develops and publishes 3D and virtual reality products. Though the video game industry remains very non-inclusive to women and people of color, Muriel counts herself as lucky to have worked at a company that was as diverse and supportive as Cocktail Vision.
Parce que l'ambiance était cosmopolite, c'est-à-dire que tous les collaborateurs venaient d'horizons différents, mais je pense que c'est surtout parce que le PDG de ce studio était très ouvert d'esprit. Du coup, il y avait des gens de toutes les couleurs.
Despite not facing discrimination as a woman or person of color in the early days of her professional career at Cocktail Vision, Muriel realizes that women and people of color are still underrepresented in the technology and science fields. So for years, Muriel has traveled to speak to young women to advocate them taking careers in science and technology, stating that young girls are still too often pushed into so-called female jobs in art, psychology, or communications, while young boys are pushed into the hard sciences. And we should work on girls' ambitions from an early age. She has worked to put a focus on prominent people of color in these fields as well, to help give young people a positive role model to help inspire them by letting them see someone who looks like them do something that they want to do, making it a little less scary and a little more encouraging because they have a reference for success. Though many of us in the States may not have heard of Muriel's groundbreaking hard work, her dedication to video games and activism have not gone unnoticed. In 2018, Muriel was appointed a Knight of the Legion of Honor, which, if that sounds impressive, that's because it is. It's the highest order of merit for civilians and military in France. Muriel has enjoyed a long and storied career, that has seen her break boundaries and encourage others, and it's far from over. Muriel is currently working with an association called Women in Games, an organization that encourages women to take professions in the gaming industry. And Muriel isn't done making video games either. In 2017, a year before receiving the Legion of Honor, Muriel started a new company called Sansastique. The company will produce her new game, Remembrance.
Je suis en train de travailler sur un projet, un jeu vidéo à nouveau historique. Je vais reprendre les thématiques de mes 2 premiers jeux vidéo concernant l'histoire des Antilles. Pour en dire un tout petit peu plus, pour le moment, il s'appelle Remembrance. Il est basé sur la mémoire, sur le souvenir. Et on va explorer la société créole quand la Martinique était encore une colonie française. On va pouvoir comparer 2 époques, avant l'abolition de l'esclavage et après, à travers une saga sur plusieurs générations de familles, celle de 3 personnages ayant connu l'esclavage et leurs descendants nés après l'abolition. Et l'on comprendra l'origine du préjugé de couleur, qui est la cause des discriminations que nous subissons encore aujourd'hui.
She's the first French female video game designer, the first ever Black female game designer, an activist, an actual knight. She's an inspiration and one of the nicest people I've ever met. And that's why Muriel Tramis is an icon on the icon.
Thank you to everyone who just watched that video. And I know a lot of YouTubers say that, but I really, really mean it. It's been something, like I said at the very beginning, has been something I've been working on for months, from going through countless and countless of articles, researching, trying to find who the first Black female game designer is, finally finding out that it's Muriel, getting in contact with her, setting up the interview, getting it translated. It's been a really big ordeal, and honestly, I couldn't be any more happier to have done it. And I really hope you guys enjoyed the video, because I had a lot of fun during the research and making it. If you like the video, of course, this is where people usually say like, share, and subscribe. But if you like the video, make sure that you go check out Muriel and support Black game designers, female game designers of all shape and color, because diversity truly matters. With that, catch you later.